My son once looked me in the eye and said, "The wedding already happened last week. Only important people were invited," and he said it while I was still smiling on the phone asking what time the ceremony would start tomorrow. That single moment cracked something inside me, a quiet shatter that no one else could hear. I hung up pretending my voice was steady, but inside, I felt the kind of humiliation only a parent can feel when their own child decides they no longer matter. I told myself I would move on. I would swallow it like I always did, but life has a way of revealing who people truly are. A month later, he called again, and this time he was cheerful, almost demanding, saying his wife wanted to use my lake house for a weekend getaway, like nothing had ever happened, like I was a resource, not a person. I remembered his words, important people, and for the first time I let the truth settle. I said, "No, it is only for important people," and then I turned off my phone. That silence did something extraordinary. Within hours, the calls began one after another, until the screen showed 56 missed calls, each one more desperate than the last. They thought I would bend, that I would forgive quickly, that I would stay small the way they preferred. They were wrong. And what happened next is the reason you will want to stay with me until the very end, because this time the one they underestimated finally had a plan. My name is Raymond Clark. I'm 68 years old, a retired accountant who spent 40 years helping small business owners make sense of their numbers. My wife Eleanor passed away 2 years ago, and since then I have lived alone in the house we shared for 4 decades, watering her roses every morning and talking to her photograph every night. The day my world cracked open started like any other Thursday. I woke at 6, made coffee in the old percolator Eleanor insisted we keep, and sat at the kitchen table watching the sunrise paint the backyard gold. I had been looking forward to this particular Thursday for 3 months. My son Andrew was getting married on Saturday, and I had spent weeks preparing. The new suit hung in my closet charcoal gray with a subtle pinstripe that Eleanor would have approved of. I had written a toast, revised it 11 times, and practiced it in front of the bathroom mirror until I could deliver it without my voice cracking. I even bought a card with extra space inside so I could write something meaningful to my new daughter-in-law. I decided to call Andrew that morning just to confirm the details. What time should I arrive at the venue? Did he need help with anything? A father wants to be useful on his son's wedding day, even if the bride's family has taken over most of the planning. I dialed his number with a smile on my face, the kind of smile I had not worn since Eleanor's funeral. Andrew answered on the 4th ring. His voice sounded strange, immediately flat and distant, like he was reading from a script he did not believe in. "Hey, Dad, what's up? I'm calling about Saturday," I said, still smiling, still foolish. I wanted to make sure I have the right time. The invitation said 2 o'clock, but I wasn't sure if that meant I should arrive earlier for photos or Dad. He cut me off and something cold slithered down my spine. The wedding was last Saturday. I didn't understand the words at first. They arrived in my ears, but my brain refused to process them. "What do you mean? We got married last week. It's done." But the invitation said, "We only invited people who mattered." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard. In that vacuum, I caught another sound, faint but unmistakable. Lydia's laugh, soft, controlled, deliberate. She was there listening to every word, and she wanted me to know it. "Andrew," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "I'm your father." "I have to go, Dad. Lydia needs me." The line went dead. I sat at that kitchen table for 2 hours without moving. The coffee went cold. The sun climbed higher. Eleanor's photograph watched me from the mantel. Her smile frozen in a moment when our family still made sense. I kept thinking there must be some mistake. Perhaps Andrew had misspoken. Perhaps there was a miscommunication about dates. I searched through every piece of mail I'd received in the past month. Every envelope, every advertisement, every bill. There was no wedding invitation. There had never been one. I called Andrew back 7 times. Each call went to voicemail. I sent 3 text messages, each more desperate than the last. No response. By late afternoon, I understood what had happened. My son had gotten married without me. Not because of an oversight, not because of a postal error, but because he had chosen to exclude me, or rather someone had chosen for him. That evening, I sat in Eleanor's chair by the window, the one she claimed every night for 38 years. Her personal belongings still filled the drawer beside it, untouched since she died. I could not bring myself to open that box to sort through the remnants of a life I missed more than I could express. Some wounds need distance before they can be examined. The doorbell did not ring. No knock interrupted the silence, But when I went to lock up for the night, I found something on the welcome mat. A white envelope, crisp and elegant. My name was written on the front in calligraphy. Inside was a wedding invitation for Andrew and Lydia's ceremony, complete with venue, time, and date. Last Saturday at 2 o'clock. There was no postmark. Someone had delivered it by hand 1 week too late. I stood in the doorway holding that invitation, and for the first time since Eleanor's death, I felt something besides grief. It started as a spark, small and unfamiliar, deep in my chest. Someone was playing a cruel game, and they had just made a terrible mistake. I did not sleep that night. The invitation sat on my kitchen table like an accusation, its elegant calligraphy mocking me with details of a celebration I had been deliberately erased from. By dawn, I knew I needed to leave this house, these walls that suddenly felt like they were closing in. I needed to go somewhere that still made sense, somewhere Eleanor's presence remained untouched by whatever poison had seeped into my family. I drove to Lake House. The cabin sits 3 hours north of the city, nestled beside a lake so still it mirrors the sky like polished glass. Eleanor and I built it together 40 years ago, back when Andrew was just a toddler and our dreams stretched out before us like an endless summer. We hauled lumber ourselves, argued over paint colors, and celebrated each finished room with cheap wine and cheaper pizza. Every beam holds a memory. Every floorboard knows the sound of our laughter. When Eleanor got sick, she made me promise to keep the place exactly as it was. "Don't let anyone change it, Raymond," she said from her hospital bed, her hand thin as paper in mine. "That cabin is where our love lives. Protect it." I had not visited since her funeral. The grief was too fresh, the memories too sharp. But now, with my son's betrayal burning a hole in my chest, I needed to feel close to her again. The drive was quiet, just the hum of the engine and the weight of my thoughts. I kept replaying Andrew's words. We only invited people who mattered. When had I stopped mattering to my own child? When had Lydia convinced him that his father was disposable? Lydia. Even thinking her name made my jaw tighten. I remembered the first time Andrew brought her home 3 years ago. She was polished, charming, the kind of woman who knew how to make everyone in the room feel special while calculating their net worth behind her smile. Eleanor saw through her immediately. "There's something cold behind those eyes," she whispered to me after dinner. "Watch her, Raymond. Watch her carefully." I dismissed Eleanor's concerns as overprotectiveness. I wanted Andrew to be happy. I wanted grandchildren, holiday dinners, the normal progression of a family growing and thriving. I ignored the warning signs because hoping was easier than seeing. But Eleanor had been right. She was always right. I arrived at Lake House just before noon. The cabin looked exactly as we left it, weathered wood and wide windows facing the water. I stood on the porch for a long moment, breathing in the pine-scented air, letting the silence wash over me. Inside, dust motes danced in the sunlight, streaming through the curtains Eleanor had sewn by hand. The furniture sat frozen in time, waiting for people who would never return together. I walked through each room slowly, touching objects like sacred relics. The kitchen where Eleanor made her famous blueberry pancakes, the living room where we played cards every Friday night, the bedroom where we held each other through thunderstorms and whispered about growing old together. The grief came in waves, but underneath it was something else, something I had not expected. Comfort. Eleanor was here, not physically but essentially. Her spirit permeated every corner. Then I remembered what I had brought with me. Eleanor's personal box had sat untouched in my closet for 2 years. I could not face it after she died, could not bear to sort through the fragments of a life cut too short. But something told me to bring it today. Perhaps the cabin gave me courage I could not find at home. Perhaps her presence here made the task feel less like an ending. I set the box on the kitchen table and lifted the lid with trembling hands. Inside were the treasures of a lifetime, old letters we had exchanged when I traveled for work, photographs from our honeymoon, our anniversary trips, Andrew's childhood milestones, a pressed flower from our first date, a lock of Andrew's baby hair in a tiny envelope. Each item carried decades of love, and I handled them like the precious artifacts they were. Near the bottom, I found something unexpected. A sealed envelope, crisp white, with my name written in Eleanor's careful handwriting. The date in the corner made my heart stop. She had written this 3 months before she died. I turned the envelope over, running my fingers across the seal. Why had she not given this to me while she was alive? What could she have needed to say that required waiting until she was gone? Part of me wanted to tear it open immediately. Another part, the part that had learned to trust Eleanor's judgment, absolutely hesitated. She had kept this hidden for a reason. Perhaps the reason would reveal itself when the time was right. I set the envelope aside, still sealed, and continued searching the box. At the very bottom, I found a note scribbled on the back of a grocery receipt. It was dated just a week before Eleanor entered the hospital for the last time. The handwriting was shakier here, the letters uneven, but the words were clear. Samuel knows things I never told you. Trust him when you need to. Samuel Hayes, our family attorney for 30 years, one of Eleanor's closest friends. What secrets had she shared with him that she kept from me? My phone rang, shattering the silence. Andrew's name lit up the screen. I answered cautiously. Hello. Dad, hey. His voice was different now, warmer, almost friendly. The shift was so jarring I nearly dropped the phone. Listen, I'm sorry about the other day. Things have been crazy with the wedding and everything. Lydia and I were wondering if we could come see you soon. She wants to talk about something important. What does she want to talk about? Just a small favor, nothing major. She thought it would be easier to discuss in person. The words landed like stones in still water. A small favor. Nothing major. In 40 years of marriage, Eleanor had taught me one thing. When someone asks for a small favor, they are usually planning to take everything. I told Andrew I would think about it and ended the call before he could press further. The forced warmth in his voice lingered in my ears like a warning siren. Something had changed. Yesterday, I was not important enough to attend his wedding. Today, I was suddenly worth a visit and a conversation. The mathematics of betrayal are not complicated. People only reach out when they want something. I stayed at Lake House that night, sleeping in the bed Eleanor and I had shared during countless summer vacations. Her scent had long faded from the pillows, but I could still feel her presence in the room, watching over me like she always did. I kept the sealed envelope on the nightstand, not ready to open it yet, but not willing to let it out of my sight either. The next morning, my phone rang while I was making coffee. The number was unfamiliar, but something told me to answer. Dad? The voice was Lydia's sweet as artificial honey. It was the first time she had ever called me directly in 3 years of knowing her. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Andrew gave me your number. He said you two talked yesterday about us coming to visit. We talked briefly. Wonderful. She stretched the word like taffy. Listen, I wanted to discuss this directly with you, woman, father to daughter-in-law. She laughed at her own joke. I did not. Andrew and I were thinking, since you have that beautiful lake house just sitting empty, it would be perfect for our second honeymoon. A little getaway, just the two of us. You're not using it anyway, right? The audacity of her words stole my breath. Not using it anyway. As if 40 years of memories were merely an inconvenience, as if Eleanor's death had transformed our sanctuary into vacant real estate waiting for new owners. You want to use the lake house? I repeated slowly. Just for a few weeks, maybe a month. We could fix it up a little, modernize some things. Those old curtains are so dated, don't you think? And the kitchen could really use an update. We'd be doing you a favor, honestly. I closed my eyes and saw Andrew's face at 5 years old, running along the dock with a fishing pole twice his size. I saw Eleanor laughing in the kitchen, flour on her nose, dancing to songs on the radio. I saw 40 years of love and labor and sacrifice, and I saw this woman trying to take it all with a phone call. I'm sorry, Lydia. My voice came out calm, almost gentle. The lake house is only for important people. The silence on the other end was magnificent. Excuse me. You heard me? I hung up before she could respond. Within an hour, my phone showed 47 missed calls. The first few voicemails were sweet confused, playing innocent. Dad, I think we got disconnected. Call me back. The next batch dropped the pretense. Raymond, that was incredibly rude. Andrew is very upset with you. By the 20th message, the mask had slipped entirely. You're making a huge mistake. We were trying to help you, and this is how you repay us. You'll regret this. I turned off my phone and let the silence of Lake House settle around me like a protective blanket. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. Something else was rising inside me, something hard and bright, dignity. For 2 years, I had shuffled through life like a ghost, apologizing for existing, accepting whatever scraps of attention my son threw my way. But Eleanor did not raise me to be a doormat. She raised me to be her partner, her equal, a man worth loving. Somewhere along the way, grief had made me forget that. I looked at the sealed envelope on the nightstand. The time had come. I opened it carefully, preserving the paper Eleanor had touched. Inside was a single sheet, her handwriting shaky but legible, every word deliberate. My dearest Raymond, if you're reading this, I'm gone and something has gone wrong. I need to warn you about Lydia. She asked me about the lake house 3 times in my final months. Who owns it? What it's worth? What happens when you die? She thinks I didn't notice, but I did. She sat beside my hospital bed asking about property values while pretending to fluff my pillows. Be careful, my love. She is not who Andrew thinks she is, and please don't let our son be used as a weapon against you. You are stronger than you know. Stand tall for me. Forever yours, Eleanor. I read the letter 3 times. Each reading carved the words deeper into my heart. Eleanor had seen everything, even as cancer ravaged her body, even as she struggled for each breath she had been watching, protecting, preparing. She knew this day would come. She knew Lydia would eventually make her move. And she had left me this warning like a lighthouse, guiding me through the storm. My hands trembled, but not from fear. Something I had not felt in years was spreading through my chest, warm and fierce. Purpose. Eleanor had seen the danger coming from beyond the grave. Now it was my turn to stand tall, just as she asked. I turned my phone back on, ready to plan my next move. Before I could open my contacts, a text message appeared. It was from Samuel Hayes. Raymond, we need to talk, urgently. Someone has been filing paperwork with your signature. I've compared the documents. The signature isn't yours. I stared at the screen, Eleanor's letter still clutched in my other hand. The game Lydia was playing was bigger than I had imagined. This was not just about a vacation home or a family squabble. This was something far more dangerous, and I was just beginning to understand how deep the betrayal went. I drove back to the city that same night, Eleanor's letter tucked safely in my jacket pocket. Samuel's text had transformed my understanding of what I was facing. This was no longer a family dispute over a vacation property. Someone was forging my signature on legal documents, and I needed to know why. Samuel Hayes had been our attorney for 30 years, one of Eleanor's closest friends since college. He practiced law the old-fashioned way with integrity and precision, and he had never once steered us wrong. When I called him from the road, his voice carried an urgency I had rarely heard. "Come to my office first thing tomorrow morning," he said. "Bring any documents you have, and Raymond, don't talk to Andrew or Lydia until we speak." I arrived at his office before the receptionist had finished her first cup of coffee. Samuel was already waiting, his desk covered with papers I did not recognize. He looked older than I remembered, the weight of whatever he had discovered etched into the lines around his eyes. "Sit down, Raymond." He gestured to the chair across from him. "What I'm about to show you is going to make you angry. I need you to stay calm and listen to everything before you react." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were documents filed with the county probate court. The header made my blood run cold: petition for determination of incapacity and appointment of guardian. "Someone filed this 3 weeks ago," Samuel explained. "The petition claims you've shown signs of progressive dementia, that you're unable to manage your own financial affairs, and that you pose a risk to yourself and your assets." I flipped through the pages, my hands growing steadier with each new outrage. There was a witness statement from someone named Patricia Brennan, claiming she had observed me acting confused and disoriented on multiple occasions. I had never met anyone by that name. There was a summary of alleged incidents, dates, and locations, fabricated with disturbing specificity. And at the bottom of several pages there was my signature, clean and official. Except it was not my signature. "I didn't sign these," I said quietly. "I know." Samuel pulled out a magnifying glass and a sample of my actual signature from our files. I compared them myself. "The forgery is good, but it's not perfect. The way you cross your T's, the slant of your R. Whoever did this studied your handwriting, but they missed the details." "Lydia." Her name tasted like poison. "Most likely. The petition lists Andrew Gray as the proposed guardian with his wife as co-guardian. If this succeeds, they would have complete control over your finances, your property, your medical decisions, everything." I thought of Lake House, of Eleanor's roses, of the life we had built together over 4 decades. All of it could be stripped away by a stack of forged papers and fabricated lies. "There's more," Samuel said, his voice dropping. Eleanor came to see me about 6 months before she passed. She was worried about something involving Lydia, but she made me promise to wait before telling you. She said you weren't ready yet, that the truth would only hurt you while she was still alive. What did she tell you? Not everything. She said she was gathering information, putting pieces together. She asked me to keep an eye on you after she was gone to watch for certain signs. He paused. She knew this was coming, Raymond. Maybe not the specifics, but she knew Lydia would eventually make a move. Before I could respond, his secretary knocked and opened the door. Mr. Hayes, there's a woman here to see Mr. Clark. She says it's urgent. A Mrs. Holloway. Maggie, I had not told anyone I was coming here. She rushed in looking pale and agitated, clutching her purse like a shield. Maggie Holloway had been my neighbor for 15 years, a widow herself who understood the particular loneliness of losing a spouse. We looked out for each other in the small ways that neighbors do, collecting mail and sharing casseroles. Raymond, thank goodness I found you. I called your house and there was no answer, so I tried this office on a hunch. She sat down heavily, catching her breath. I need to tell you something. I didn't think much of it at the time, but after what you told me about Andrew's wedding, I started putting things together. What is it, Maggie? Last week I was at the pharmacy picking up my blood pressure medication. Lydia was there in the consultation area with the pharmacist. I wouldn't have paid any attention except I heard her mention your name. My stomach tightened. What did she say? She was asking about medications. Specifically, she wanted to know which prescriptions cause confusion or memory problems in elderly patients. She said her father-in-law was having some issues and she wanted to understand his treatment better. Maggie's eyes were wide. But Raymond, you're not on any medications that cause confusion. I know because you told me yourself you barely take anything besides vitamins. The room fell silent. Samuel and I exchanged a look that said everything. This was not just greed. This was not merely an opportunistic grab for property. Lydia was building a case from multiple angles, forging documents, fabricating witnesses, and potentially planning to drug me into the very confusion she was claiming I already suffered from. It was systematic, calculated, designed to erase me legally and financially while making it look like natural decline. Raymond, Samuel said, his face grave, this isn't amateur hour. She's building a case against you with forged documents, fake witnesses, and medical insinuations. If we don't act fast, she could have you declared incompetent within 60 days. I looked at Eleanor's letter still in my hand. I thought of her words. You are stronger than you know. Stand tall for me. Then we don't let her, I said. We fight. Samuel nodded slowly, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. Good, because I have an idea. He leaned forward, hands folded on the desk. But you're not going to like it. Samuel's idea was simple but required swallowing my pride. I needed to prove my mental competence before Lydia could file her petition. If I established a clean psychiatric evaluation on record first, her fabricated claims would crumble against documented medical evidence. The law favors whoever builds the stronger paper trail, and right now, Lydia was winning that race. I know a neuropsychologist, Samuel said. Dr. Patricia Webb. She's respected in the courts, completely independent, and she doesn't take kindly to people who exploit the elderly. If you pass her evaluation, and you will have ammunition Lydia can't overcome. The appointment was scheduled for the following morning. I spent the night at home, unable to sleep, staring at Eleanor's photograph on the nightstand. Part of me resented having to prove my own sanity to strangers. I had managed a successful accounting practice for 40 years. I balanced complex ledgers in my head, remembered client details from decades past, and kept every aspect of my life organized with precision. The idea that anyone could call me incompetent was absurd, but I understood now that truth did not matter to people like Lydia. Only documentation mattered, only evidence. Dr. Webb's office was clinical, but not cold, decorated with diplomas and soft artwork meant to put anxious patients at ease. She was younger than I expected, perhaps 50, with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog everything I did from the moment I walked in. Mr. Clark, she said, shaking my hand firmly, I understand you're here for a comprehensive cognitive evaluation. Before we begin, I want you to know this isn't a test you can fail. It's simply an assessment of how your brain functions right now. There's no judgment here. I appreciated her directness. We spent 90 minutes together working through a battery of tests that challenged my memory, reasoning, attention, and problem-solving abilities. She asked me to remember lists of words, draw complex figures from memory, solve mathematical puzzles, and explain abstract concepts. Some exercises were simple, Others surprisingly difficult, but I approached each one with the same methodical focus I'd applied to balance sheets for 40 years. When we finished, Dr. Webb set down her pen and looked at me with what I could only describe as professional admiration. Mr. Clark, I'll have the full written report ready within 48 hours, but I can tell you now that your cognitive function is exceptional. Your memory recall is above average for any age group. Your executive function is intact. Your reasoning abilities are sharp. She smiled slightly. Frankly, you're sharper than most people half your age. Whoever suggested you might be mentally unfit either doesn't know you at all, or they have ulterior motives. I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Thank you, doctor. Don't thank me. Thank your brain. Whatever you've been doing to keep it healthy, keep doing it. Samuel filed the evaluation with the court that same afternoon, establishing an official record of my mental competence, dated before any petition from Lydia could be submitted. We were building our fortress one document at a time. That evening, I returned to Eleanor's letter, reading it again with fresh eyes. This time, I noticed something I had missed before, a line near the bottom that seemed to glow with new significance. Samuel knows things I couldn't tell you while I was alive. When the time is right, he'll show you. I called Samuel immediately. The letter mentions you, I said. Eleanor wrote that you know things she couldn't tell me. There was a long pause on the other end. I was wondering when you'd ask about that. What did she tell you, Samuel? Not on the phone. Come to my office tomorrow. There are documents you need to see. The next morning, Samuel placed a folder in front of me labeled Eleanor Clark Estate Confidential. Inside were papers I had never seen, legal documents dated from Eleanor's final months, prepared while she was battling the cancer that would eventually take her. Eleanor came to me 6 months before she died, Samuel explained. She was worried, Raymond. She had noticed things about Lydia, questions that seemed too pointed, interest in your finances that felt predatory. She didn't want to burden you while you were focused on caring for her, so she asked me to help her prepare. He pointed to the first document. This is an updated deed to Lake House. Eleanor transferred her half of the property into an irrevocable trust with you as the sole beneficiary and trustee. The terms are specific. The property cannot be sold, transferred, or encumbered without your explicit written consent, not Andrew's consent, not anyone else's, only yours. My vision blurred. Eleanor had been dying. She had been fighting for every breath, every moment, and instead of focusing only on herself, she had been protecting me, building legal barriers against a threat she saw coming before anyone else. She knew, I whispered. She suspected. She said she hoped she was wrong, that maybe Lydia would prove to be a decent person after all, but she didn't want to take chances. Samuel's voice softened. She loved you, Raymond. This was her way of continuing to love you even after she was gone. I covered my face with my hands, and for the first time in 2 years, I wept. Not from grief, but from gratitude. Eleanor had seen the danger coming. She had armed me for a battle she knew she would not live to fight. When I composed myself, Samuel leaned forward with a different energy. There's more Eleanor left, but she made me promise to wait until things got worse. We're not there yet. Right now, Amisal, we need to focus on gathering evidence of what Lydia is actually doing. We need her to incriminate herself. I understood immediately what he was suggesting. You want me to invite her to Lake House? Samuel nodded. She'll think she's won. She'll get comfortable. And when she does, he tapped the table with his finger. We'll be ready. I thought of Eleanor's words. You are stronger than you know. I picked up my phone. I'll make the call. The call to Andrew was the hardest performance of my life. I had to sound defeated, weary, like a man who had finally accepted his own irrelevance. Every word tasted like ash in my mouth, but I delivered them with the precision of someone who had spent 40 years managing difficult clients. Andrew, I said when he answered, tell Lydia she can come see the lake house. Maybe we can work something out. The silence on his end stretched for several seconds. When he spoke, confusion and relief tangled in his voice. Really, Dad, you mean it? I've been thinking about what you said, about family sticking together. Maybe I've been too stubborn. The lies came easier than I expected. Perhaps because I understood now that I was not deceiving my son. I was protecting myself from the woman who had turned him into a stranger. That's great, Dad. I'll tell Lydia right away. She'll be so happy. He hung up without saying he loved me. I noticed. Within 7 minutes, my phone rang again. Lydia's number flashed on the screen and I let it ring 3 times before answering, maintaining the illusion of reluctance. "Dad," her voice dripped with triumph she could barely conceal. "Andrew just told me the wonderful news. I knew you'd come around eventually. Family should stick together, don't you think?" "I suppose you're right. I always knew you were reasonable deep down." "We just got off on this wrong foot, that's all. Once you get to know me better, you'll see I only want what's best for everyone." I let her talk, offering minimal responses while cataloging every word for later analysis. She spoke about Lake House like she already owned it, describing renovations she wanted to make furniture. She planned to replace walls she intended to tear down. Each sentence revealed more of her true nature than she realized. Then she said something that made me pause. "Mother always said property is the only thing that matters. Everything else is just sentiment." Mother. Not my mother or mom, but simply mother, spoken with a reverence that suggested deep influence. I filed the detail away without comment. "Can you come this Saturday?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "We can discuss everything in person." "Saturday is perfect. I'll come alone just to talk. No pressure, no conflict, just 2 people finding common ground." I agreed and ended the call as quickly as politeness allowed. Just to talk. The words echoed in my mind like a warning bell. People like Lydia never wanted just to talk. They wanted to win. The next 3 days were spent preparing Lake House for her visit. Samuel connected me with a security specialist who understood our needs without asking too many questions. Together, we installed motion-activated cameras throughout the property, devices so small and modern they were virtually invisible. One went inside a smoke detector in the living room. Another was hidden within a picture frame on the mantel, positioned to capture the entire seating area. A third was concealed in the decorative clock Eleanor had loved, the one shaped like a little cabin that she had bought during our honeymoon. Every angle was covered. Every room was monitored. Samuel arranged for the footage to stream directly to a secure server maintained by his law firm. He explained the legal framework carefully. We lived in a one-party consent state, which meant I could legally record any conversation I was part of without informing the other party. As long as I was present during Lydia's visit, everything she said could be used as evidence in court. "The key is getting her comfortable," Samuel advised during our final preparation call. "She needs to believe she's won. People reveal their true selves when they think they're in control. Let her talk. Let her brag. Let her show you exactly who she is." I tested each camera myself, walking through the cabin and checking the feeds on my laptop. The images were crisp and clear, capturing every corner of the space Eleanor and I had built together. Watching the empty rooms on screen felt strange, like observing a theater before the actors arrived. Soon enough, the performance would begin. On Friday evening, I sat on the porch watching the lake turn gold in the sunset. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the sky like a mirror. Eleanor and I used to sit here together, holding hands, watching the day surrender to night. I could almost feel her presence beside me, her quiet strength steadying my nerves. My phone buzzed with a text message. Maggie's name appeared on the screen. "Be careful, Ray. I saw a woman I didn't recognize parked outside your house yesterday. Older, well-dressed, watching your windows. She drove away when I approached." I stared at the message, reading it 3 times to make sure I understood. An older woman. Well-dressed. Watching my house. Not Lydia, who was young and would have no reason to hide. Someone else. Mother always said property is the only thing that matters. The words returned to me with new weight. Lydia had mentioned her mother with unusual reverence, as if reciting scripture passed down through generations. What kind of woman raised a daughter to see elderly men as obstacles to wealth? What kind of mother taught her child that forgery and manipulation were acceptable tools for acquiring property? I typed a reply to Maggie. "Did you get a look at the car?" Her response came quickly. "Silver Mercedes. New model. She looked like Money Ray, the expensive kind." Lydia drove a white SUV. I had seen it in photographs from the wedding I was not invited to attend. Whoever this woman was, she was not my daughter-in-law. The cameras blinked green inside the cabin, recording nothing but empty rooms and dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. Everything was ready. Lydia had agreed to come alone on Saturday just to talk. But I was beginning to understand that Lydia was not working alone. Someone else was involved, someone older and wealthier, someone who preferred to watch from a distance while others did the dirty work. Tomorrow, the trap would spring. But I suspected the game was bigger than I had imagined. Lydia arrived at 11 o'clock sharp, pulling up the gravel driveway in a sleek black sedan I had never seen before. It was not the white SUV from the wedding photos. This car was newer, more expensive, the kind of vehicle that announced its driver's ambitions before they stepped out. I watched from the window as she checked her reflection in the side mirror, adjusted her hair, and strode toward the cabin with the confidence of someone collecting a prize. She did not knock. She simply walked in, pushing the door open as if she already held the deed. "Dad?" She spread her arms wide in a gesture of false warmth. "This place is even more charming than I remembered. Rustic, quaint." Her eyes swept across the room, cataloging everything with the efficiency of an appraiser. I noticed she did not ask how I was doing. She did not mention Eleanor. She did not acknowledge that this was the first time she had visited a home filled with 40 years of memories, belonging to a woman she had helped exclude from her own son's wedding. None of that mattered to her. Only the square footage mattered. Only the lakefront view. "Can I get you something to drink?" I offered, keeping my voice mild. "Water is fine. Bottled if you have it." She was already walking through the living room, running her fingers over the furniture, pausing to make notes on her phone. "This couch will have to go, and these curtains. Honestly, Dad, when was the last time anyone updated this place? The 80s. Eleanor had sewn those curtains by hand during our 5th anniversary trip. She had chosen the fabric specifically because it matched the wildflowers that bloomed along the lakeshore every spring. I said nothing. Lydia continued her inspection, drifting into the kitchen and opening cabinets with proprietary ease. "The appliances are ancient. We'll need to gut the whole thing. Maybe knock out this wall to create an open concept. That's what buyers want these days." "Buyers?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Eventually. Not right away, of course. But you have to think about resale value. This place could be worth twice as much with the right renovations." I followed her back into the living room, settling into the chair that faced the hidden camera in Eleanor's clock. "I didn't realize you were planning to sell it." "Not immediately." She sat across from me, crossing her legs with practiced elegance. "But let's be realistic, Dad. You're not getting any younger. This place is a lot to maintain. Wouldn't it be easier to sign it over now? Let Andrew and me handle everything. You could relax, stop worrying about property taxes and repairs. We'd be doing you a favor." "A favor?" "Exactly." She smiled, and for a moment I saw the predator beneath the polish. "Andrew agrees with me completely. He thinks you should just transfer the title, now avoid the hassle of probate later. It's really the responsible thing to do, for everyone." I let the silence stretch, watching her confidence grow with each passing second. She interpreted my quietness as surrender, my stillness as defeat. People like Lydia could not imagine strength that did not announce itself. "Why do you want this place so badly?" I asked softly. She laughed, a sharp sound that echoed off the walls Eleanor had helped me paint. "Because it's worth something, Dad, unlike sitting here rotting away with your memories." She gestured at the room with undisguised contempt. "All this sentimental junk means nothing in the real world. Property has value. Nostalgia doesn't. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for everyone." My phone vibrated silently in my pocket. I didn't reach for it, keeping my expression neutral, while Lydia continued her monologue about renovation plans and market values. When she finally paused to check her own phone, I glanced at the message from Samuel. "Getting everything. This is gold." Before I could respond, Lydia's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and something shifted in her face, a softening I had never seen before. She stood and walked toward the window, her back to me, her voice dropping into a register that sounded almost childlike. "Hi, Mother." A pause. "Yes, I'm here now. He's being cooperative." She listened for a moment, nodding, even though the person on the other end could not see her. "Don't worry. By next month, this will all be ours." Another pause, then a laugh. I know. I'll handle it. I always do." She ended the call and turned back to me with her mask firmly in place. "Sorry about that. Family stuff. Now, where were we?" I didn't move. I didn't let my expression change. But inside, everything clicked into place with the cold precision of a lock engaging. This was not just Lydia's scheme. Someone else was pulling the strings. Someone she called Mother, with the reverence of a soldier reporting to a general. The woman in the silver Mercedes, the architect behind the forged documents and fabricated witnesses. The real enemy had not yet shown her face. But she would. And when she did, I would be ready. Lydia excused herself to take another call, stepping into the kitchen with her phone pressed to her ear. She assumed I was too old and slow to notice. She assumed wrong. I rose quietly from my chair, murmuring something about needing fresh air, and slipped out the side door onto the porch. The kitchen window was cracked open just enough for the summer breeze to drift through, just enough for me to hear every word. Lydia's voice carried clearly in the still afternoon air. She was no longer speaking in the honeyed tones she used with me. This voice was sharper, younger somehow, like a child reporting to a demanding parent. "Mother, he's old and alone. There's no one to protect him. Yes, I planted the incompetency paperwork with the county. The witness statement is filed. No, Andrew doesn't suspect anything. He's too in love with me to question what I tell him." I pressed myself against the cabin wall, barely breathing. I know. I'm working on getting him to sign something. A transfer, a power of attorney, anything we can use. He's being more stubborn than I expected, but he'll break eventually. They always do. A pause. I could not hear Margaret's responses, but I could imagine them cold and instructional, the voice of a woman who had done this before. Lydia laughed softly. "I remember, Mother. You taught me well. When Grandmother signed over her house, I watched how you did it. You waited until she was scared and confused, then you handed her the pen. She didn't even understand what she was giving away." My blood turned to ice. "If he won't cooperate," Lydia continued, "we proceed with the incompetency filing. The forged evaluation should be enough, especially with that fake witness statement. Old people sign things when they're confused and scared. You've always said that." Another pause, then her voice dropped even lower. "Don't worry. By the time I'm done, Raymond Clark won't have a penny to his name. Lake House, his savings, everything. Andrew will inherit it all eventually, and when he does, it becomes ours. Mine and yours, just like we planned." I closed my eyes, letting the horror of her words wash over me. This was not simple greed. This was not even just Lydia's scheme. This was a pattern, a family tradition of predation passed down from mother to daughter. Margaret Carter had manipulated her own elderly mother, stripped her of her home while she was too frightened to resist. Now she was teaching Lydia to do the same thing to me. For a strange moment, I felt something unexpected pity. Lydia had been raised by a monster, shaped from childhood to see elderly people as resources to be harvested. She had never learned that love could exist without calculation, that family could mean something beyond financial opportunity. Her moral compass had been broken before she ever had a chance to develop one. But pity did not excuse her choices. She was an adult. She had options. She could have rejected her mother's teachings, could have chosen kindness over cruelty. Instead, she had embraced the path of a predator. And now, she was coming for everything Eleanor and I had built together. The sound of tires on gravel made us both freeze. A car was coming up the driveway, but it was not the vehicle I expected. Through the trees, I recognized Andrew's silver sedan, the one he had driven since college. He was not supposed to be here. Lydia had insisted on coming alone. I stepped around the corner of the cabin just as Andrew parked and climbed out. His face was pale, uncertain, carrying an expression I had not seen since he was a teenager caught in a lie. "Dad, Lydia." He looked between us, confusion deepening into something else. "I came early. I needed to see you both. I needed to—" He trailed off, his eyes settling on his wife. Lydia's mask snapped back into place with practiced speed, but not fast enough. For one unguarded second, her face had shown irritation, calculation, the cold assessment of a hunter whose prey had wandered off script. Andrew had seen it. I watched the recognition flicker across his features, watched him process what he had glimpsed beneath the performance. "Honey," Lydia's voice was sugar again, but the sweetness rang hollow now. "I told you I wanted to handle this alone. You didn't need to come." "I know." Andrew's voice was strange, distant, but something felt wrong. I couldn't stop thinking about it. He looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time since Eleanor's funeral. "Dad, are you okay?" In that moment, I saw something in my son's eyes I had not seen in years. Doubt. The first crack in the wall Lydia had built around him. I did not answer his question. I did not need to. The truth was already beginning to seep through the cracks, and once it started, nothing Lydia could say would stop it. The three of us stood in a frozen tableau, the tension thick enough to choke on. Lydia recovered first, her smile snapping back into place like a weapon being drawn. "Andrew, honey, perfect timing. Your father and I were just discussing the lake house. He's being so generous about letting us use it. Aren't you, Dad?" She reached for Andrew's arm, but he stepped away, his eyes still fixed on me. "What's going on here?" he asked quietly. I looked at my son, at the uncertainty etched into his features, at the crack in the armor Lydia had built around him. This was the moment. Everything I had prepared for, everything Samuel and I had planned, came down to the next few minutes. "Andrew," I said, keeping my voice calm, "sit down. There's something you need to hear." Lydia's laugh was too bright, too quick. "Raymond, let's not be dramatic. We were having a perfectly nice conversation before you—" "Sit down, Andrew." Something in my tone stopped her mid-sentence. Andrew hesitated, then lowered himself into the chair facing Eleanor's clock. He did not know about the camera hidden inside. He did not know that every word spoken in this room had been recorded and streamed to Samuel's secure server. He only knew that his father, for the first time in years, sounded like a man who would not be ignored. I pulled out my phone, opened the file Samuel had sent me, and pressed play. Lydia's voice filled the room, crisp and clear through the speaker. "Honestly, Dad, I don't know why you're so attached to this place. It's not like you have that many years left to enjoy it." Andrew's face went pale. The recording continued. "Because it's worth something, unlike sitting here rotting away with your memories." I watched my son flinch at each cruel word. Watched him hear his wife describe his mother's home as sentimental junk with no real value. Then came the phone call with Margaret, the conversation I had overheard through the window. "Mother, he's old and alone. Yes, I planted the incompetency paperwork. No, Andrew doesn't suspect anything. He's too in love with me to question what I tell him." Andrew's hands gripped the arms of the chair so tightly his knuckles went white. Lydia stood frozen by the window, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. The final piece played, Margaret's instructions. Lydia's eager compliance, the casual mention of doing the same thing to her own grandmother. "Old people sign things when they're confused and scared. You taught me well, Mother." Silence fell like a hammer. I turned off the phone and looked at my son. His face had cycled through shock, denial, and something else, something that looked almost like recognition. He did not look surprised enough. The realization hit me like a physical blow. "You knew," I said quietly. "Didn't you?" Andrew would not meet my eyes. His shoulders began to shake, and when he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "I knew she was after the lake house. I knew she talked to her mother about plans, about inheritance, about getting control of your assets. I heard things. I saw emails she didn't know I read." He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. "But I thought if I gave her what she wanted, she'd finally love me. I thought I could control it, manage it, keep it from going too far. I told myself you'd be okay, that she wouldn't actually hurt you. You chose her approval over my dignity." "I was a coward, Dad." His voice cracked on the word. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I had prepared myself for Lydia's betrayal. I had steeled myself against her cruelty, her greed, her calculated manipulation. But this, my own son admitting he had known and done nothing, cut deeper than anything she had said. He had watched his wife try to have me declared incompetent. He had stayed silent while she forged my signature. He had chosen a woman's conditional affection over 40 years of unconditional love. Lydia's face had gone white during Andrew's confession. She looked between father and son, realizing she had lost control of the narrative she had so carefully constructed. Then something shifted in her eyes. Not defeat, calculation. "Andrew," she said softly, stepping toward him. "You're confused. Your father has clearly manipulated this situation. He's not well. We talked about this. He needs help, professional help, and he's lashing out because he's scared. Don't let him turn you against me." "Stop." Andrew's voice cracked. "Just stop." "Honey, listen to me. I said stop." He stood abruptly, putting distance between them. "I heard you. I heard everything. You were going to destroy him, and you wanted me to help." Lydia's mask finally shattered, her face twisted with contempt as she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "You'll both regret this. My mother will make sure of it. You have no idea what you're dealing with." I stood slowly, meeting her eyes with a calm I did not entirely feel. "Your mother," I said, "is next." Lydia slammed the door behind her, but she didn't leave. Through the window, I watched her pace beside her car phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly as she spoke. She was calling for reinforcements. She was regrouping. The battle was not over yet. 20 minutes later, Samuel's car appeared at the end of the driveway. I'd called him immediately after Lydia's departure, and he had broken several speed limits to arrive. He walked into the cabin carrying a leather briefcase stuffed with documents, his expression grim but focused. "Where is she?" he asked. "Outside. On the phone with her mother." He nodded, unsurprised. "Good. Let her panic. It'll make the next part easier." Andrew sat slumped in the corner chair, his face buried in his hands. He had not spoken since Lydia stormed out. I could not tell if he was grieving his marriage or processing his own complicity. Perhaps both. Samuel laid his briefcase on the kitchen table and began removing folders with methodical precision. "I've spent the last 48 hours building our case," he said. "What we have now is more than enough to destroy her." He spread the documents across the table like a general displaying battle plans. The first folder contained the fraudulent incompetency petition with my forged signature highlighted in yellow. Beside it was a report from a certified handwriting expert documenting 17 distinct inconsistencies between the forgery and my authentic signature. "The forgery analysis alone would be enough to open a criminal investigation," Samuel explained, "but we have more." The second folder contained digital forensics. Samuel had hired a specialist to trace the origin of the forged documents. Every file led back to a single computer registered to Lydia Carter Gray, complete with timestamps showing when each document was created and modified. "She wasn't careful," Samuel said. "She thought she was dealing with a helpless old man who would never fight back. She left fingerprints everywhere." The third folder was the recordings. Transcripts of everything Lydia had said at Lake House, every cruel word, every confession, every damning phone call with her mother. Samuel had already submitted copies to the county prosecutor's office. "The charges she's facing are serious," he continued. "Elder financial abuse is a felony in this state. Combined with fraud, forgery, and conspiracy, she's looking at potential prison time. Even if she avoids the maximum sentence, her life as she knows it is over." The side door opened and Lydia stepped back inside. She had composed herself during the phone call, her mask firmly in place again, but something desperate lurked behind her eyes. She saw the documents spread across the table and went very still. "What is this?" Samuel turned to face her with the calm authority of a man who had spent 40 years dismantling liars in courtrooms. "This, Mrs. Gray, is the end of your scheme. We have the forged signatures you created traced to your personal computer. We have your recorded confession admitting to the incompetency paperwork. We have evidence of your mother's involvement and her history of similar crimes against her own family. The prosecutor's office has already opened a file." Lydia's face cycled through several expressions settling on wounded innocence. "This is all a misunderstanding. I never meant to hurt anyone. My mother pressured me into this. She's been controlling me my whole life. I'm a victim too." Samuel's response was ice. "Victims don't forge documents, Mrs. Gray. Victims don't file fraudulent petitions to have innocent people declared incompetent. Victims don't discuss strategies for stealing property from elderly men while laughing about how easy it will be." He closed the folder with a sharp snap. "You made choices. Every signature you forged was a choice. Every lie you told was a choice. And now you'll face the consequences of those choices." Lydia looked to Andrew, searching for an ally. "Honey, please, you know me. You know I would never—" "Stop." Andrew's voice was hoarse but firm. He stood slowly, keeping distance between himself and his wife. "I want to file for separation. Immediately." Lydia's mask cracked. "You can't be serious." "I should have done this years ago." He looked at me, and I saw something I had not seen in my son since he was a young man full of promise, clarity. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The wound of his complicity was still fresh, but beneath the pain I felt the first stirring of hope. My son was choosing to stand. It had taken too long, cost too much, but he was finally standing. Lydia stood frozen in the middle of the room, watching her empire of lies crumble around her. Then her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, saw her mother's number, and something hardened in her face. The desperate innocence vanished, replaced by cold determination. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "You think you've won? You have no idea what my mother is capable of." She answered the phone as she walked toward the door, her voice low and urgent. I caught fragments of the conversation. They have everything. Yes, everything. I don't know how. What do we do?" Samuel watched her go, then turned to me with a grave expression. "She's going to run. Or she's going to do something desperate. People like her don't surrender gracefully. They escalate." I thought of the woman in the silver Mercedes watching my house from the shadows. I thought of Margaret Carter, who had stripped her own mother of everything she owned. I thought of the pattern of predation stretching back through generations. "I'm counting on it," I said. The video appeared online the next morning. Maggie called to tell me about it, her voice tight with anger, and I made the mistake of watching. Lydia sat in what appeared to be a friend's living room, soft lighting, flattering her tear-streaked face. She wore no makeup, a calculated choice that made her look younger and more vulnerable. Her voice trembled with perfectly calibrated emotion as she addressed the camera. "I never wanted any of this to become public." She began dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "But I have to tell my side of the story before my father-in-law's lies destroy my reputation completely. Raymond Clark is a sick man. He's suffering from dementia, and instead of getting him the help he needs, my husband has been manipulated by his delusions. I'm the real victim here. All I ever wanted was to help our family, and this is how I'm being repaid." She went on for 12 minutes, spinning a narrative so divorced from reality it would have been laughable if it were not so effective. She painted herself as a devoted daughter-in-law, tirelessly caring for a confused old man who had turned on her for reasons she could not understand. She mentioned the lake house as a source of family conflict, implying that I had become paranoid and possessive after my wife's death. She even managed to work in a reference to Eleanor, suggesting that my grief had triggered a mental decline that the family had been trying to address privately. "I'm heartbroken," she concluded, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. "I loved my father-in-law. I still do. But I won't let his illness be used as a weapon against me. The truth will come out eventually. It always does." The video gained traction with terrifying speed. Within hours, it had thousands of views and hundreds of comments. I made the second mistake of reading them. "Poor thing, you can tell she's genuinely hurt. Old people with dementia can be so cruel. My grandmother was the same way. That man should be in a care facility, not attacking his own family. Stay strong, Lydia. The truth always wins." Each comment felt like a small knife. These strangers knew nothing about me, nothing about Eleanor, nothing about the 40 years of love and labor that had built the life Lydia was trying to steal. Yet they had already judged me guilty based on 12 minutes of manufactured tears. Samuel found me sitting in my kitchen staring at my phone with the kind of numbness that comes after sustained assault. He took the device from my hands and set it face down on the table. "Stop reading that garbage." "They believe her," I said. "All those people believe her." "Of course they do. She's young, attractive, and crying. The internet loves a pretty victim." He sat across from me, his voice steady and firm. "But here's what you need to understand, Raymond. Let her dig deeper. The higher she climbs on a foundation of lies, the harder she falls when the truth comes out. She just committed herself publicly to a version of events we can completely disprove. She's handed us a weapon." "What do you mean?" "I mean that video is evidence of defamation. She accused you of having dementia on a public platform. We have a certified psychiatric evaluation proving you're mentally sharp. She claimed to be a victim of your delusions. We have recordings of her admitting to forgery and fraud." Samuel almost smiled. She thought she was getting ahead of the story. Instead, she just made our case stronger. A knock at the door interrupted us. I opened it to find Emily Holloway standing on the porch, her young face flushed with indignation. Maggie's granddaughter was 17, sharp as a tack, and apparently not afraid of confrontation. "Mr. Clark, I saw that video," she said without preamble. "It's disgusting. She's lying about everything and people are believing her." "I know, Emily. But you have that recording, right? The one where she admits what she did." She pulled out her phone, already thinking 3 steps ahead. "Can I share it? I know how to make things go viral. I can edit together the key parts, add context, make sure people understand what really happened." I hesitated. The idea of fighting a public battle made my stomach turn. I was a private man who had spent his entire life avoiding drama and spectacle. But Lydia had made this public. She had dragged my name through the mud and declared war in front of thousands of strangers. Perhaps it was time to fight back on the same battlefield. I looked at Samuel. He shrugged. "It's your call. The recordings are legally obtained. There's nothing stopping you from sharing them." I turned back to Emily. "Do it." She worked fast. Within 2 hours, she had compiled the most damning portions of Lydia's recorded confession, complete with timestamps and context. Her voice narrated over the footage, calm and factual, explaining who Raymond Clark really was and what Lydia had actually done. The video ended with Dr. Webb's psychiatric evaluation, proving beyond doubt that I was mentally competent. Emily posted it to the same platforms where Lydia's video had spread. The response was immediate and overwhelming. "Oh my God, she's a monster." That poor man. His own daughter-in-law tried to have him declared incompetent. "This is elder abuse. Someone call the police." "Lydia Gray is finished. Cancel her." The tide turned with dizzying speed. Lydia's tearful video was suddenly being shared alongside Emily's response, the contrast between performance and reality damning her more effectively than any legal document could. Her comments section transformed from a support group into a firing squad. That evening I sat with Samuel on my back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. "She'll come back to Lake House," I said quietly. "People like her can't resist trying one more time." Samuel nodded. "Then we'll be ready." The next morning I was making coffee when I heard vehicles pulling up outside. I looked through the front window and saw a news van parking at the curb, a reporter and cameraman already unloading equipment. Behind them, a silver Mercedes I recognized from Maggie's description rolled to a stop. The door opened and an elegant older woman stepped out. She was perhaps 70, impeccably dressed, her silver hair styled with precision. Her face was set in cold determination, the expression of someone accustomed to commanding every room she entered. Margaret Carter had arrived to save her daughter's scheme. But she didn't know she was walking into the final act of a play I had already written. I did not have time to prepare before my front door swung open without a knock. Margaret Carter strode into my living room as if she owned it, her heels clicking against the hardwood with the authority of someone who had never been told no. The news crew remained outside, their cameras rolling, capturing the arrival of Lydia's mother like vultures circling fresh prey. Margaret was everything I had expected from Maggie's description. Elegant, poised, radiating the kind of confidence that comes from decades of getting exactly what she wanted. Her eyes swept across my modest home with barely concealed disdain before settling on me with laser focus. "Mr. Clark," she said, her voice clipped and commanding, "this has gone far enough. My daughter made some mistakes, I'll grant you that, but you're destroying her life over a misunderstanding. Surely we can resolve this like civilized adults." I remained seated in my armchair, refusing to be intimidated by her entrance. "Mrs. Carter, I wondered when you'd show your face." Her perfectly shaped eyebrows rose a fraction. "Excuse me, I've heard quite a bit about you. Your daughter mentions you often, especially when she thinks no one else is listening." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Please sit down. We have much to discuss." She did not sit. She stood in the center of my living room, like a general surveying a battlefield, clearly unaccustomed to being anything other than in control. "I don't know what lies Lydia may have told you," she said, adjusting her tone to something approaching reasonable, "but I can assure you this entire situation has been blown out of proportion. My daughter loves your son. She was simply trying to help your family plan for the future. If she was overzealous, it was only because she cares." "Is that what you call it? Being overzealous?" I leaned forward slightly. "Is it also overzealousness when you taught her how to do this? The same way you taught yourself with your own mother?" The silence that followed was magnificent. Margaret's composure cracked for just a moment, a flash of something dark and startled crossing her face before she sealed it away. "What are you talking about?" The back door opened, and Samuel stepped into the room carrying a folder I had not seen before. He had been waiting in the kitchen, listening for his cue, timing his entrance with the precision of a man who had spent decades orchestrating courtroom moments. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "my name is Samuel Hayes. I'm Mr. Clark's attorney. I think you should look at these documents before you say anything else." He spread the contents of the folder across my coffee table. Property transfer records dated 15 years ago. A deed to a house in Connecticut signed over from one Dorothy Frances Carter to her daughter Margaret Elizabeth Carter, just 3 weeks before the elderly woman's death. A handwriting analysis comparing Dorothy's signature to other samples, noting the same patterns of shakiness and inconsistency that appeared in the forged documents Lydia had created. "Your mother owned a home worth nearly $400,000, Samuel said, his voice cold and factual. She signed it over to you while she was suffering from late-stage Alzheimer's disease. The transfer was never contested because your siblings were too grief-stricken to investigate, and because you had already convinced everyone that Mother wanted you to have everything. Margaret's face had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. That's ancient history. It has nothing to do with... It has everything to do with this, Samuel interrupted. You established a pattern of behavior 15 years ago. You identified a vulnerable elderly person, manipulated them into signing over their assets, and timed the transfer to avoid scrutiny. Then you taught your daughter to do exactly the same thing. He closed the folder with a sharp snap. The county prosecutor has been notified. An investigation into your actions, both past and present, is now underway. I watched Margaret's face as the words sank in. For the first time since she had walked into my home, she looked uncertain. The armor of confidence she wore like a second skin was showing cracks. "This is ridiculous," she said, but her voice had lost its commanding edge. "You can't prove any of this." "We don't have to prove it ourselves," Samuel replied. "That's what prosecutors are for, but I suspect when investigators start looking into your financial history, they'll find more than just your mother's house. People like you don't stop at one victim." Movement near the door caught my attention. Lydia had slipped inside at some point, perhaps hoping to support her mother's intervention. She stood frozen now, watching the scene unfold with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not anger, not calculation, something closer to devastation. "Mother," she said quietly, "is it true what they're saying about grandmother?" Margaret turned sharply. "Lydia, not now. You told me grandmother gave you the house because she loved you most. You told me she wanted the family to have it." Lydia's voice was rising, years of carefully constructed reality crumbling around her. "You said what we were doing to Raymond was just smart planning. You said everyone does it." "Lydia, be quiet. Did you lie to me about all of it?" The question hung in the air unanswered. Margaret's silence was its own confession. I watched Lydia's face as she processed the truth, as she realized that the mother who had shaped her entire worldview was nothing more than a predator who had raised another predator. She had been a pawn her entire life, molded into a weapon by a woman who had never loved anyone but herself. Samuel cleared his throat. "Mrs. Carter? Mrs. Gray, I suggest you both leave now. The restraining order paperwork is already being processed. You'll be served before the end of the day." Margaret gathered what remained of her dignity and walked toward the door, her heels no longer clicking with authority but retreating in defeat. Lydia followed, casting one last glance back at me, her expression unreadable. The restraining order was filed that afternoon. Lydia and Margaret were both prohibited from coming within 500 feet of me or Lake House. The judge's words were clear and unequivocal. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. That night, I drove back to Lake House alone. I needed to feel Eleanor's presence, to sit in the home we had built together and process everything that had happened. The stars reflected on the still water, pinpricks of light dancing on the surface like memories refusing to fade. My phone buzzed, a notification from the security cameras. Someone had just tripped the motion sensor at the front door. I opened the app, my heart pounding, and felt my blood turn to ice. There on the screen, illuminated by moonlight, was Lydia's face. She was trying to break in. I was not watching from home when the motion sensor triggered. I was already at Lake House, sitting in the darkness of the living room, waiting in the chair that faced Eleanor's decorative clock. The same chair where I had sat while Lydia revealed her true nature weeks before. The same chair where I had listened to her promise her mother that everything would soon be theirs. Samuel had asked me if I was certain she would come. I told him there was no doubt. People like Lydia could not accept defeat. They could not walk away while any possibility of victory remained. The restraining order meant nothing to her except an obstacle to be circumvented. The public humiliation only fueled her desperation. She would come for the deed, for any document she could use as leverage, for one last chance to salvage her crumbling scheme. I watched through the security app on my phone as her car pulled up the dark driveway with its headlights off. She parked behind the tree line where she thought the cameras could not see, not realizing I had added new units since her last visit. Every angle was covered now. Every shadow held a witness. She approached the cabin on foot, moving with the furtive urgency of someone who knew she was breaking the law, but believed herself too clever to be caught. She tried the front door first, found it locked, then circled to the side where the original windows had older, weaker latches. I heard the crack of breaking glass, watched on my phone as she reached through to unlock the frame and climbed inside. I sat perfectly still in the darkness as she moved through the house. She didn't turn on any lights, using her phone's flashlight instead, casting wild shadows across the walls Eleanor had helped me paint 4 decades ago. She went straight to the filing cabinet in the spare bedroom, the one where she assumed I kept important documents. She rifled through folders with frantic hands, scattering papers across the floor in her desperation. When she did not find what she was looking for there, she moved to the kitchen, then the master bedroom, pulling open drawers and dumping their contents without care. Finally, she returned to the living room and spotted the antique desk in the corner, the one Eleanor had inherited from her grandmother. She yanked open the top drawer and pulled out a folder labeled Lake House Property Documents. Her gasp of triumph echoed through the silent cabin. I reached over and turned on the lamp beside my chair. The light flooded the room, and Lydia spun around with a scream that could have shattered the windows she had already broken. The folder slipped from her hands, papers scattering across the hardwood floor like fallen leaves. "Hello, Lydia," I said calmly. She pressed herself against the desk, her chest heaving, her eyes wild with shock and fear. "How did you were supposed to be at home, watching helplessly while you destroyed evidence and stole documents." I shook my head slowly. "Your mother raised you to be predictable. I knew you would come the moment the restraining order was filed. People like you cannot accept losing. You had to try one more time." "This is entrapment," she stammered. "You set me up. I gave you every opportunity to walk away. You chose to break into my home, violate a court order, and attempt to steal property that was never yours." I stood, feeling older than my years, but steadier than I had felt in months. "Every choice was yours, Lydia. I simply made sure there were witnesses." Red and blue lights flashed through the windows before she could respond. The sound of car doors slamming, boots on gravel, voices calling out in the darkness. Lydia's face went white. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." The front door opened and 2 police officers stepped inside, their hands resting on their belts. Samuel had coordinated everything with the local sheriff's department. The live camera feed had been streaming directly to their station from the moment Lydia's car appeared on the property. They had watched her break the window. They had watched her search through my belongings. They had everything they needed. "Lydia Carter Gray," the first officer said, "you're under arrest for breaking and entering, violation of a restraining order, and attempted theft. You have the right to remain silent." She didn't go quietly. She struggled as they handcuffed her, screamed accusations and threats that echoed off the walls of the home she had tried so hard to steal. As they led her toward the door, she turned back to face me one final time. "You planned this?" she shrieked. "You're not a victim. You're a monster. You destroyed my life." I did not respond. I simply watched as the officers guided her outside and into the back of their cruiser. The red and blue lights painted the trees in alternating colors, a silent spectacle witnessed only by the stars and the still waters of the lake. I stood on the porch until the police car disappeared down the road, its lights fading into the darkness like embers dying in a fire. The night was quiet again. The trap had sprung. Lydia had destroyed herself just as I knew she would. Samuel appeared in the doorway behind me, his footsteps soft on the wooden boards. He was holding an envelope I did not recognize, thick and official-looking, the kind that holds documents meant to last beyond a single lifetime. "Raymond," he said quietly, "Eleanor told me to give you this when it was finally over. I think it's time." He placed the envelope in my hands. My breath caught when I saw the front, 3 words in Eleanor's handwriting, the letters careful and deliberate despite the weakness she must have felt when she wrote them. My final gift. My hands trembled as I held the envelope. Eleanor's handwriting seemed to glow in the dim light of the cabin. Each letter a connection to a woman I had loved for over 4 decades and mourned for 2 years. Samuel stood quietly beside me, giving me space to process what I was holding. "She came to me 6 months before she passed," he said softly. "She was already very sick, but her mind was sharp as ever. She had a specific request, something she wanted kept secret until the right moment. Why didn't you tell me before?" "Because she asked me not to. She said you weren't ready, that you needed to fight this battle on your own terms first. She wanted you to find your strength before you discovered hers." I sank into the chair by the window, the same chair where Eleanor had sat countless evenings watching the sun descend behind the mountains. The envelope felt heavier than paper should, weighted with love and foresight, and the kind of protection that transcends death. Samuel continued, his voice gentle but precise. Eleanor created an irrevocable trust for Lake House. The terms are very specific. The property cannot be challenged, sold, or transferred without your explicit written consent during your lifetime. No power of attorney can override it. No conservatorship can touch it. Even if someone had successfully had you declared incompetent, they would have found that the Lake House was beyond their reach. I looked up at him, struggling to comprehend what he was telling me. "There's more," he said. "She added a condition. If anyone ever tried to take the property from you through fraud or manipulation, the trust would automatically transfer to a charitable foundation in her name, the Eleanor Clark Foundation for Elder Rights." He paused, letting the words sink in. "She wanted to ensure that if predators came for you, they would get nothing, not a penny, not a square inch. Their greed would fund the very cause they tried to exploit." Eleanor. Even dying, even struggling for every breath, she had been thinking of me. She had been building fortresses I did not know existed, planting seeds of protection that would bloom only when I needed them most. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were the legal documents Samuel had described, pages of careful language designed to shield me from exactly the kind of attack Lydia had launched. But beneath the legal papers was something else, a single sheet of stationery, cream-colored, covered in Eleanor's handwriting. The letters were shakier than the ones on the envelope, evidence of how weak she had been when she wrote them. But every word was clear, every sentence deliberate. "My dearest Raymond." I read aloud, my voice breaking on her name. "If you're reading this, then someone tried to take what we built together, but they failed, because I will always protect you even when I'm no longer there to hold your hand. The Lake House isn't just property. It's where we fell in love, where we built our dreams, where I want your memories of me to live forever. No one can take that from you now. I knew you would be strong when the time came. I knew you would stand tall. That's why I fell in love with you all those years ago, not because you were powerful, but because you were good. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for the life we shared. And when you sit on that porch watching the sunset, know that I'm sitting beside you always. Stand tall, my love. I'm so proud of you. Forever yours, Eleanor." I could not continue. The words blurred as tears flooded my eyes, tears I had been holding back for 2 years, tears I had refused to shed because shedding them meant accepting that she was truly gone. But now, holding her final gift in my hands, feeling her love reach across the void between life and death, I could not hold them back any longer. I wept. Not the quiet, dignified tears of a man trying to maintain composure, but deep, racking sobs that shook my entire body. I wept for Eleanor, for the years we should have had together, for the cruel disease that stole her from me too soon. I wept for my son, for the relationship we had lost and might never fully recover. I wept for myself, for the loneliness and the fear in the moments when I wondered if I had anything left worth fighting for. Samuel placed a hand on my shoulder briefly, then slipped outside without a word. He understood that some moments are sacred, that grief and healing often wear the same face, that a man sometimes needs to fall apart completely before he can put himself back together. I do not know how long I cried. Time lost meaning in that small cabin filled with Eleanor's presence, but eventually the tears subsided, leaving behind something unexpected. Not emptiness, but peace. Not despair, but gratitude. Eleanor had given me one final gift, not just legal protection, but permission. Permission to grieve, permission to feel, permission to be human in a world that often demanded I be strong. The sun was rising by the time I lifted my head. Golden light crept across the floor, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air like tiny spirits. Eleanor's letter lay in my lap, her words seared into my memory forever. Footsteps on the porch made me turn. Andrew stood in the doorway, his face pale and uncertain. He was holding something in his hands, a leather-bound photo album I recognized from our family room at home. "Dad," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "can we talk?" I wiped my face with the back of my hand and gestured for Andrew to come inside. He moved hesitantly, as if the cabin he had visited hundreds of times as a child had become unfamiliar territory. Perhaps it had. Perhaps we both needed to learn how to navigate this space again. He sat across from me, the photo album resting on his knees. In the morning light, I could see how much he had aged in the past few weeks. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, his shoulders slumped with a weight that went beyond physical exhaustion. He looked like a man who had finally stopped running from the truth and found it heavier than he expected. "I made this," he said, opening the album. "Last night. I couldn't sleep, so I went through all our old photos and put together a new one." without her. He turned the pages, slowly revealing images I had not seen in years. Andrew as a toddler sitting on Eleanor's lap by this very lake. Our family Christmas when he was 7, all 3 of us wearing matching ridiculous sweaters Eleanor had knitted. His high school graduation, Eleanor beaming with pride while I tried not to cry. His college years. His first apartment holidays and birthdays and ordinary moments that had seemed unremarkable at the time, but now felt precious beyond measure. I want to remember who we were, Andrew said quietly, before I let her change me, before I forgot what mattered. I studied my son's face, searching for the boy I had raised, the young man who had once shared his dreams and fears without hesitation. He was still in there, buried beneath years of manipulation and compromise, struggling to find his way back to the surface. Andrew, I said, why are you really here? He closed the album and met my eyes. To apologize, really apologize, not the kind where you say sorry and expect everything to go back to normal. The kind where you admit exactly what you did wrong and accept that it might not be enough. He took a deep breath, and when he spoke again, his voice was steady but raw. I knew what Lydia was doing. Maybe not all of it. Not the forged documents or the fake witnesses, but I knew she was after your money and the lake house. I heard her talking to her mother about plans. I saw emails she thought she deleted, and I told myself I could control it, that I could manage her ambitions, keep her from going too far. His voice cracked. I chose my fear of being alone over your dignity. I let her exclude you from my wedding because I didn't want to fight with her. I stayed silent while she tried to have you declared incompetent because I was terrified of losing her. That was unforgivable. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with truth. I had waited weeks to hear my son acknowledge what he had done, and now that he had, I felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just profound sadness for the years we had lost and the relationship we had damaged. You broke my trust, Andrew, I said slowly. You broke your mother's memory. She loved you more than anything in this world, and you let a woman who never cared about either of us use her death as an opportunity. I paused, watching him absorb the weight of my words. I can't pretend that didn't happen. I won't pretend. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I know. I'm not asking you to. Trust isn't given, I continued. It's built, brick by brick, day by day, through actions that match words. If you want to be part of this family again, you need to earn it. Not with apologies, not with photo albums, not with grand gestures, with time. With choices that prove you've changed. With showing up when it's hard and staying when it would be easier to leave. I understand, he whispered. Do you? Because this isn't something that gets fixed in a conversation. This is years of work, years of rebuilding what you helped tear down, and there's no guarantee it will ever be the same. I know. He wiped his face with his sleeve, looking more like the boy I remembered than the man he had become. I'm not asking for guarantees. I'm asking for a chance. That's all. We sat in silence for a long moment, the morning light warming the room, Eleanor's presence filling the spaces between us. I thought about her letter, about standing tall, about being good rather than powerful. Forgiveness was not about pretending harm had not occurred. It was about choosing to leave a door open while letting the other person decide whether to walk through it. The chance is yours, I said finally. What you do with it is up to you. Andrew nodded and stood to leave. At the doorway, he paused and reached into his pocket. There's one more thing. He pulled out a small velvet box worn at the edges. Lydia had these. I found them when I was cleaning out the house. She was going to sell them. He handed me the box. I opened it, and my breath caught in my throat. Eleanor's pearl earrings. The ones she wore on our wedding day, the ones she had promised to pass down through our family generation to generation as her mother had passed them to her. Mom would have wanted you to keep them, Andrew said. I closed the box, gently holding it against my chest where my heart beat with memories of the woman who had worn these pearls while promising to love me forever. No, I said quietly. Your mother would have wanted you to give them to someone worthy. Someday when you find her, you will. Andrew's eyes filled with fresh tears. Can I come home, Dad? Not today. I know I haven't earned it yet, but someday. I looked at my son for a long moment, seeing both the man who had betrayed me and the boy I had raised with so much hope. "The door is open," I said, "but you have to be the one to walk through it." 3 months passed before I felt ready to celebrate. Lydia pleaded guilty in early October, accepting a deal that spared her the humiliation of a public trial. 18 months in state prison, plus mandatory restitution for the legal fees and emotional damages her scheme had caused. The judge's words were measured but firm as he handed down the sentence. She stood in the courtroom wearing the same face she had worn the day she walked into my lake house, like she already owned it, but the confidence was gone now. She looked smaller somehow, diminished a woman who had gambled everything on cruelty and lost. I did not attend the sentencing. Samuel went in my place and called me afterward with the details. I listened quietly, feeling none of the satisfaction I had expected. Lydia would serve her time and emerge into a world that wanted nothing to do with her. Her reputation was destroyed. Her marriage was over. Her schemes had collapsed around her like a house built on a sand. She would be released to a life of nothing, and that was a punishment far greater than any prison cell. Margaret's reckoning took longer but cut deeper. The investigation into her past uncovered what Samuel had suspected all along. Her mother was not the only victim. Over 3 decades, Margaret had manipulated at least 4 elderly relatives into signing over property and assets, always timing her moves to coincide with illness or cognitive decline, always covering her tracks just well enough to avoid scrutiny. But scrutiny had finally arrived. Multiple charges were filed. Civil suits followed. Her carefully constructed life of wealth and influence crumbled as victim after victim came forward to tell their stories. The woman who had raised her daughter to see elderly people as resources to be harvested was now facing the harvest she had sown. Andrew filed for divorce the week after Lydia's arrest. He moved into a small apartment across town, a modest place with secondhand furniture and bare walls, nothing like the life of luxury Lydia had promised him. He started therapy twice a week at first, then once a week as the wounds began to heal. He visited me every Sunday afternoon, bringing coffee and sitting on my porch while we talked about nothing and everything. The conversations were awkward, at first stilted by years of distance and the weight of what had happened between us. But slowly, week by week, we began to find our way back to each other. He was not the son I remembered. He was someone new, someone shaped by failure and regret, someone who was learning for the first time what it meant to build rather than take. I didn't know if I would ever fully trust him again, but I had decided to give him the chance to earn it, and so far, he was trying. The gathering at Lake House was Maggie's idea. She insisted that I had spent too long alone with my thoughts and needed to fill the cabin with life again. I resisted at first, but she wore me down with the persistence that had made her such a good neighbor for 15 years. By the time I agreed, Emily had already planned the menu, and Samuel had cleared his schedule. They arrived on a Saturday afternoon in late November when the trees had turned gold and the lake reflected the sky like a mirror. Maggie brought her famous apple pie. Emily brought her youthful energy and a playlist of songs she promised would not give me a headache. Samuel brought a bottle of wine Eleanor had always loved, a gesture that made my throat tighten with gratitude. And Andrew brought himself hesitant and hopeful, standing at the edge of the group like a man still learning he was welcome. The cabin filled with laughter for the first time in years. We ate too much and talked too loudly and told stories about Eleanor that made us cry and smile in equal measure. Emily convinced me to dance to one of her songs, and I surprised everyone, including myself, by actually enjoying it. Samuel raised a toast to Eleanor, to justice, to family both chosen and given. Maggie held my hand during the quiet moments and reminded me that I was not alone. As the evening deepened and the sun began its descent toward the mountains, I slipped away from the group and walked down to the dock. The wood creaked beneath my feet, familiar as my own heartbeat. I stood at the edge where the water lapped gently against the posts and pulled Eleanor's letter from my pocket. I'd read it dozens of times since Samuel gave it to me. Every word was memorized, every stroke of her handwriting burned into my soul. But I read it again anyway, letting her voice fill my mind one more time. Stand tall, my love. I'm so proud of you. I folded the letter carefully and returned it to my pocket, pressing my hand against my chest where it rested close to my heart. The sun was painting the water gold and pink, the same colors Eleanor had loved, the same colors that had witnessed our first kiss on this very dock 43 years ago. I thought about everything I had lost. My wife, my trust in my son, 2 years of peace stolen by people who saw my grief as an opportunity. I thought about everything I had gained, strength I did not know I possessed, friends who stood beside me when it mattered, a son who was finally learning to be the man his mother had believed he could become. I thought about Andrew's words from that first phone call, the ones that had shattered me. We only invited important people. Behind me, the porch erupted with laughter. I turned to look at the people gathered there. Maggie refilling wine glasses, Emily showing Andrew something on her phone, Samuel watching them all with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had helped build something good. The lake house had always been for important people. I smiled, a real smile full of hard-won peace. This time, I whispered to the sunset, to Eleanor, to myself, I chose myself. And that made all the difference. And that was my story. A story about betrayal and resilience, about the people who try to break us and the strength we find when we refuse to let them. I once believed that being kind meant being silent, that keeping the peace was more important than protecting my dignity. Eleanor taught me otherwise, even from beyond the grave. She showed me that standing tall is not about fighting back with anger. It is about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. For those of you listening tonight, perhaps you have known what it feels like to be underestimated because of your age, to be dismissed by the very people who should love you most, to wonder if walking away means giving up. I hope my story shows you that walking away from those who harm you is not surrender. It is the first step toward finding the people who truly matter. Family is not always blood. Sometimes it is the neighbor who checks on you, the young person who believes in your fight, the friend who stands beside you in the courtroom. The lake house taught me that home is not a building. It is wherever you are surrounded by people who see your worth. If this story touched you, I would love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to stand up against someone who underestimated you? How did you find your strength? Share your experiences in the comments below and tell me where you are listening from tonight. Your voice matters, and your story might be the one that helps someone else find the courage to stand tall. Thank you for listening, for being part of this community, and for believing that quiet strength can still win in a loud world. Until next time, remember Eleanor's words, you are stronger than you know.